Hello, everyone, and welcome to this course on the history of astrobiology and the origin of life. My name is Arda Shams, and I'll be your guide through one of the most profound scientific journeys humanity has ever attempted. Understanding where we come from, how life began, and whether we share this universe with anyone else. Well, this course would be more focused on the historical side of it. But in the future courses, we're going to delve more deep into the scientific background and different field and findings related to this. um, so let's start very shortly for this introduction section. First, let's talk about what is astrobiology. So, astrobiology, it is the science that asks some of the oldest questions humans have ever wondered, like where did we come from? How did life begin on Earth? Does life exist elsewhere? If it does, what it looks like? And if it doesn't, why? But the beauty of astrobiology is that it's not just one field. It's not the most interdisciplinary science as we have today. So it contains biology, chemistry, planetary science, geology, astronomy, physics, and even philosophy all sit at the same table and talk about the same puzzle we call life. So, in most sciences, life is strictly related to biology, let's say. But in astrobiology, you need to zoom out and also zoom in. Life is also a planetary process, almost like a climate or tectonics. If you consider that evolution of biosphere is also related to lithosphere around, and they form each other. Geological chemistry forms the first proto molecules, let's say. So it's highly interdisciplinary field. When Earth formed, the ocean formed, and early chemistry formed. Life didn't break this pattern; it continued it. So we're not gonna ask what is life. We gotta ask what does a planet need to become alive. What kind of chemistry naturally leads to metabolism, and how the stars and planetary systems influence biology. This is why an astrobiologist might one day study RNA folding, and the next day can study methane cycles on Mars, and that's very normal. So let's move on to the next slide on what we will be learning. So, as I mentioned, this will be based on the historical background of this field. So, we're going to learn scientific history at a certain point. So, how humans explained life when there was no science, and how philosophy evolved into biology. And we're gonna see origin of life research and the milestones in history about it, and NASA's role in building astrobiology, Mars and ocean worlds on exoplanet missions, the modern scientific research for life, and future breakthroughs, and this unified field and how it is related. But as a lecture wise, we're gonna go through the ancient and cultural origins, Greek philosophy, scientific revolution, and end of spontaneous generation. We're gonna see the origin of life chemistry, at least the historical background, birth of modern astrobiology, Mars and ocean worlds. We're gonna see the exoplanet revolution and synthetic biology and protocells and future of life detection. As you can see, we will zoom out and also zoom in at the same time. Like we're gonna go through the origin of life and even the atoms and small molecules, but we need to also go way out to planetary systems and exoplanets. So, why astrobiology matters, let's say. Well, I wouldn't Well, this is interdisciplinary science and one of the few ones that requires a research team from all different fields. And it not just traces life beginnings, it searches also the life in the universe. And it will help us understand past, future, our existence, even the philosophical problems. And it's one of the fastest growing fields today. Um, we can say that it's a strange thing where it's the only science where studying a hydrothermal vent on Earth help us understand Europa, where analyzing ancient clay minerals help us think about Mars, where understanding the chemistry of Titan atmosphere teach us about the first billion years of Earth. And also, the most important thing is it is the science that forces us to place ourselves in the universe. To me, that's the real reason most people love this topic. It's not because the aliens might show up, but because the question, are we alone, makes us think about our significance. I always think about, for example, the origin of life research, sort of a scientist that having a existential crisis. So, trying to understand the existence itself and why we are here. So these are the one of interesting questions, and we actually going to ask some questions. Let's see the fundamental questions here. So these are the fundamental questions in your screen, and these are the oldest questions actually. What is life? Its origin? Why do we exist? What causes birth, death, and natural cycles? Where did life begin? Are we alone? Sounds simple, but each of them contains centuries of debate. One of my favorite things about these questions is this: no matter what answer we eventually find, the implications are huge. If we're alone in the universe, let's say, then life on Earth is the rarest, most precious phenomenon we know of. It means the universe is mostly silent and we are something unbelievably unusual. If we're not alone, then biology is a universal process, not an Earth specific accident. It means we are part of a cosmic ecosystem. Either answer is very, very extraordinary. But while thinking about it, we also consider the time itself, because time is so large that we might not be older at the same time, and this might really affect our understanding of the how rare or possible the existence of life is. So let's go through with our historical background now. So we're gonna start with mythology and cultural beginnings. So we are traveling back a few thousand years for this, and you might ask why. So before science and laboratories and microscopes, someone looked at the world around them and tried to understand life. The only way they could through stories. These stories weren't primitive, they were models, ancient cognitive frameworks, the first attempts at building theories of existence. They need to understand and explain things because scientific, well, let's say, or evolutionary, when we have this ability of consciousness, what we call, we need to explain stuff because we can't make without explanations. And if we are not able to find them, we need to come up with even the most mythological explanations for us to feel safe. So, most of these explanations would relate back then from supernatural forces, symbolic stories, divine inventions, and moral frameworks. And we're gonna little bit explore them. It won't take long, the first lecture is, but let's continue. Yeah, Mesopotamian views. So it's really interesting. Life from clay. So I always loved the Mesopotamian myth, human shaped from clay by gods. What's funny about this is that this isn't far from the scientific truth. Many modern hypotheses Clay catalysts, Montmorillon-assisted RNA polymerization literally involve clay, enabling life chemistry. So there are really interesting hypotheses about it. So the oldest creation story in human history accidentally predicted a modern origin of life mechanism that blows my mind every time. And if you go back to ancient Egypt, life became a cosmic order. So in ancient Egypt, life wasn't an accident. It was part of the Ma'at, who was also a god but a cosmic order. And Ra, the sun god, creates life, and Pharaoh maintains the harmony of it by cycles. So, one of the earliest recorded science question in Egypt was basically why does Nile flood every year? And actually, Nile helped them create their religion and their philosophy, actually, which contained that opposite forces can exist at the same time at the same place together. And so this opens an idea of a balance and contradiction would be making sense. For example, the Nile were floods every year, and it actually causes many harms. It collapses buildings and kills people, drowns them. But also, when the Nile moves back, you can see the field and the soil become um, much more fertile and helps them to actually for their crops and foods. So a very perfect example of early humans connecting natural cycles to life. Also, they interpreted in this into the origin of the universe itself, where there was a river of chaos and different forces were together and causing different things. So it's all about perspective and relativity. So what ancient Egyptians thought was very interesting philosophical wise, and then we come to Abrahamic traditions. These are Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Introduced the idea of a single creator, intentional design, and humans created in the image of God. This becomes important later because the worldview shaped Western science for centuries. It slowed some areas, accelerated others, and many scientists were actually priests. So, actual religion helped science a lot because most of the believers wanted to examine the ways of God, which was science. So there are many different world myths. And China, there is Panju, where universe uh, originate from a cosmic egg. And India, there is uncertainty of creation. And Mesoamerica, there is Popol Vuh, like figures where human shaped from maize. But there are universal mythic patterns in all of them. So across the cultures, you start seeing same recurring motives. A creator or external agent. There's a primordial material like clay, water, maize, or egg. And there's an order coming from the chaos. And life infused with a purpose. So these patterns aren't coincidence. They reflect actually how human brain evolve to seek the causality and narrative and agency. This is why studying myth matters. It reveals the early structure of human curiosity that eventually becomes science. These shown that there's a common way of explanation and understanding in all Homo sapiens and our desire to explain things and foundations for later rational inquiry and why origins are universal scientific questions and why do we care really. So we're gonna transition into philosophy. This is where it gets exciting. Somewhere around 600 BC in ancient Greece, humans do something revolutionary. They start asking questions without invoking gods. and we're gonna explore them in our next section. Because when observation comes in and reasoning borns, we're gonna see this transition and see example of questions of what is the world made of, and evolution, natural selection, and many, many more. It is basically the birth of science. This is where our story truly will begin. So, as you see from the slide, the journey from the myth to modern astrobiology isn't going to be a random. It's a continuing story of humans trying to understand what life is, how it began, how it ends, and where it might exist beyond Earth. From Climate to NASA's Mars missions, it's all one continuous human effort. So we're gonna see a lot throughout this course, and trust me, once you understand the story behind the science, everything becomes 10 times more meaningful. So, alright, that's our introduction. In the next lecture, we'll dive into the birth of rational thought, the Greek philosophers who took the first scientific steps, like Thales, Anaximander, Empedocles, Aristotle, Presocrates, and how they planted the seeds of not just the biology but all the science itself and astrobiology itself. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in lecture 2.